The principal's voice shook as she clutched the phone. "We have a chemical hazard situation. Send Hazmat immediately." Her panic rang through the office, crisp and urgent. Meanwhile, a small girl stood quietly nearby, her hands folded, her skin and clothes streaked with bright color. She carried herself with the calm of a child who has just finished a craft project, not someone triggering an emergency. Before we dive into the story, tell us where you're watching from. What began as an ordinary school morning would soon spiral into an extraordinary scene, starting the moment she stepped off the bus. The bus doors hissed as they swung open. Out stepped the girl, her body a canvas of streaked color from head to shoes. In the sunlight, the dried polish caught the light, pink, blue, even hints of silver glitter forming a stiff shell across her skin. With each step, tiny flakes clicked against the pavement, a sound that only added to the strangeness of her appearance. The children behind her stared, whispering as they edged forward. At the curb, parents squinted, unsure if they were looking at a playful costume or an accident. A few pulled their kids closer, while one or two reached for their phones, torn between worry and the urge to capture the scene. The girl herself felt none of their concern. She carried her colors like a badge, smiling as she walked, her hair swinging, oblivious to the tension gathering around her. To her, this was a morning of pride, a chance to show off the art she and her older sister had carefully painted the night before. Her teacher, standing just past the gate, noticed immediately. The child's face was cheerful, but the splotches across her arms and clothes suggested something else entirely. Seen out of context, the streaks didn't look like playful polish. They looked like spilled chemicals. A short breath caught in the teacher's chest as she hurried forward. She crouched slightly, bringing herself eye to eye with the girl. "Sweetheart, are you feeling okay?" The teacher's tone was steady, but her hand lingered close, as if ready to assess skin or breathing at once. She scanned the child for wheezing, red rashes, or signs of discomfort. Everything looked fine, yet her pulse quickened. Placing a supportive hand on the girl's shoulder, she guided her toward the office. The girl walked lightly beside her, still thinking about the fun she'd had painting, still certain her classmates might be impressed. She didn't notice the faint tension in her teacher's grip, or the way the adults along the walkway stepped back as they passed. Inside the school building, the hallway hushed. What looked whimsical to the child now carried an edge of unease for every adult who glimpsed her. And as she reached the heart of the building, the quiet eyes waiting there would set the stage for the next wave of reaction. The principal noticed her at once, the doorway framing a child streaked with color against the pale walls of the office. Paperwork slipped from her focus in an instant. Her steady rhythm of signing and sorting gave way to a jolt of alarm that tightened her breath. Her thoughts raced ahead before she could slow them. To her eye, the stiff shine across the girl's clothes had the look of a chemical spill, something sharp or caustic. A memory flickered. The safety seminar that had stressed how even small exposures could become major liability. That reminder pressed on her chest like a weight. She rose quickly, then knelt to meet the child's eyes. "Sweetheart, are you hurt anywhere?" A pause. The girl grinned, shook her head, silent but pleased with herself. The principal tried again, her words clipped. "Do you feel sick?" Another shake, still smiling, as if this were all part of a game. The child's calm should have eased her, but instead, it magnified the worry. Each cheerful denial deepened the sense that she was missing something urgent, something hidden. She glanced at the staff nearby, who stood frozen, unsure whether to step closer or back away. Her hand found the thick binder on the shelf, the emergency protocols. The plastic cover felt cool and heavy. She opened it just enough to glimpse the familiar hazard chart and closed it again. The training was clear. Act swiftly, call in experts, never assume safety until proven. Her fingers wavered over the phone, then pressed down. She steadied her voice to conceal the tremor in her hands, speaking with a taut, quiet calm that sounded professional, but carried strain beneath it. "Let's clear this area," she instructed the secretary softly. She gave quiet orders to keep staff at a distance, then turned to the line that would bring outside help. The receiver felt solid, almost too heavy, as she recited her request for immediate support. Around her, the office seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what came next. And what followed would soon spill beyond that single room, reaching every corner of the school as the day took a startling turn. The first siren carried through the air as morning classes settled into routine. Teachers paused mid-sentence when the intercom crackled. A firm voice delivered a single order: "Keep students indoors." No explanation followed. In classrooms, children crowded the windows, their faces pressed to glass, whispering guesses about the sudden commotion. The unfamiliar sound heightened curiosity. What had seemed like an ordinary day now felt heavy with interruption. Down the hall, teachers clustered in hushed groups, uncertain but unwilling to let students sense their unease. Some mentioned a spill in the art room. Others wondered about nearby construction. With details absent, even small suggestions grew within minutes into larger possibilities. Outside, the approaching wail grew louder until the first emergency truck pulled into view. Its flashing lights painted the school walls, signaling a seriousness visible even from a distance. Soon after, a team in full protective suits stepped from their vehicle. The suits themselves, white, sealed, and rigid, spoke volumes. To the children peeking through blinds, they looked like figures from another world. To the staff, the sight pressed their worries into something sharper, more immediate. The school's parking lot morphed quickly. Yellow tape stretched across familiar paths, drawing hard lines that marked danger zones. Emergency workers moved with brisk, choreographed steps, radios crackling in clipped exchanges. Gone were the sounds of recess. In their place came the low thrum of engines idling and the harsh squawk of static. Parents driving past slowed, staring at the sudden display of flashing lights. Some called the office in a rush of questions. The secretary answered each one with the same limited statement, her voice steady but offering little. "The situation is being handled." Words that only left more to guess. Each call seemed to ripple outward into new circles of worry. Inside, far from the caution tape and flashing lights, the little girl had been seated at a small office table. A staff member handed her a box of crayons, and she bent happily to her paper. A beat of silence here. Her small fingers pressed each color hard enough to leave flakes of polish on the page. She glanced at the doorway now and then, curious about the muffled alarms and hurried footsteps. But she never paused her drawing. What began as confusion in the office was no longer just inside the school walls. Beyond the building, the response was already stirring wider circles of attention, drawing in voices and eyes from every direction. Messages raced through parent groups, and within minutes, more cars were pulling up along the school's curb. Parents hurried across sidewalks, hearts pounding faster than the sirens they'd heard earlier. By the time they reached the yellow tape, dozens stood clustered together, their eyes searching the building, each face drawn tight with fear. Mothers and fathers balanced younger siblings on their hips, or gripped strollers with white knuckles as they leaned forward for any glimpse past the emergency trucks. One voice cracked from the crowd, a simple plea that hung in the air. "Are they okay?" The tape fluttered lightly between the adults and the school, the thin barrier reminding each one how little control they had. If this part resonates with you, leave a comment. Rumors rushed through the crowd as easily as the wind. Some whispered about a chemical spill in the science lab. Others repeated a claim that toxins had already harmed children inside. Each retelling heightened the tension, the lack of any clear statement giving imagination free rein. News crews arrived soon after, the bright vans and rooftop antennas drawing even more attention to the scene. Camera crews set up along the edge of the tape, their lenses turning toward worried faces and flashing lights. Every angle magnified the atmosphere, making the scene feel larger, more urgent. and harder for parents to ignore. The anxious crowd pressed against the boundaries while microphones hovered near, collecting whatever fragments of conversation could pass for updates. Meanwhile, long shots of the Hazmat team's deliberate steps captured the public's eye. The protective suits shimmered under the sun, each movement slow and exact, the sort of professional detail that made the unknown feel perilously real. The principal emerged briefly, her shoulders tight as she paused at the doorway. Parents gasped softly when they saw her expression crease with strain before she retreated inside again. That fleeting image gave shape to every rumor, convincing many that the danger was truly grave. Inside the office, the child still sat at her small table, crayons scattered loosely around her. A paramedic crouched down to meet her gaze, his presence quiet amid the rush outside. In that small space, where the world's panic gathered beyond the walls, one clear exchange was about to shift everything. The Hazmat specialist bent down, his suit creasing as he lowered himself to the girl's eye level. Behind his shield, his gaze stayed steady, cautious but patient. He raised a gloved hand toward her sleeves, then spoke in a calm, muffled voice. "Can you tell me what this is on your skin and clothes?" A pause followed. The office, which had been tense for so long, seemed to grow even quieter. You could almost hear every breath waiting for her reply. The little girl's smile widened. Her short answer came in a bright, proud tone. "It's nail polish." Performance note. Keep her response very short and cheery to emphasize innocence. Just a few words, no long sentences. She lifted her hands to show the colors more clearly, as if presenting her artwork to a classroom. It was obvious, in her mind, that these marks had only ever been decoration. The specialist leaned closer and gave a small, deliberate sniff near her shoulder. Through his mask came the unmistakable note of solvent and sweetness, the scent anyone might recognize from a nail salon. His shoulders loosened. He pulled off one glove and pressed a fingertip lightly to a hardened patch of color. It crumbled with ease, leaving fine flakes on his palm. That was enough. He stood and faced the principal, his voice simple and direct. "This is nail polish. Completely harmless." The air shifted instantly. A tension that had filled the room for nearly an hour drained in a matter of seconds. The principal's face flushed as her hands slowly unclenched. Relief settled in, but so did something else. An unmistakable embarrassment that such a small detail could have set off such a chain of alarms. Staff around her exhaled at last, some swapping uncertain glances, others shaking their heads softly at the buildup that had seemed so dire only moments before. Outside those office doors, though, the full weight of the precaution had already spread across the campus and beyond. The discovery inside would soon ripple outward, meeting the crowd, the cameras, and the long minutes of worry waiting on the other side. One by one, the emergency crews pulled away, leaving the school grounds quiet again. The lingering hum of engines faded, and for the first time all day, the building looked like itself. From her office window, the principal stood still, bracing for the part she couldn't avoid: how to face the people who had been waiting outside. She stepped out toward the parents and the row of cameras, carrying herself with as much steadiness as she could manage. The microphone on its stand seemed too sharp in the late afternoon light, every lens tilting toward her as if expecting answers. When she spoke, her tone was deliberate. She explained the steps the staff had taken and acknowledged how disruptive the result had been. "We followed the safety protocols we were trained to use," she said, her voice steady if not entirely at ease. Her words carried equal parts defense and humility, an attempt to remind families that their children had been protected, even if the outcome now seemed excessive. Among the cluster of parents, the relief was obvious. So was the frustration. Some held their children close, grateful they were unharmed, while others shook their heads at the hours lost. A father muttered about deadlines missed for nothing more than dried polish. A mother asked, in plain exhaustion, why no adult thought to ask the girl about her colors before alarms were sounded. Reporters noted the ending with clipped efficiency. Their equipment came down more quickly than it had gone up, cameras folding back into vans without the urgency that had filled the earlier hours. The larger story was no longer a danger, but a lesson. Inside the classrooms, teachers gave their own explanations, softened for young ears. They framed it as a moment when adults became cautious about something new. Students, meanwhile, turned their curiosity back to the girl herself, who became the nail polish girl almost immediately, admired at recess for the unusual art she had brought to school on her skin. The principal met with the family later that day. Her apology was sincere, her voice softened by relief and weariness. She pledged new steps to prevent overreactions, introducing a checklist staff would follow. Ask the child directly. Scan for actual signs of harm. And, if uncertainty remains, call home before calling outside agencies. The girl's mother accepted the apology with grace, though her expression hinted at bigger conversations waiting at home. And while adults began to move on, another question remained: how all of it looked through the eyes of the little girl at the center. Through the entire experience, the girl stayed puzzled by how seriously the adults reacted. To her, the painted rainbows she and her sister had created were cheerful and fun, the best kind of art project. When teachers leaned close with worried faces, she thought for a moment that maybe they were playing a very serious game she didn't yet understand. The arrival of the people in white suits nudged her feelings into something heavier. A small knot formed in her stomach. Maybe nail polish wasn't really allowed on skin. Maybe she should have asked first. For a few minutes, she wondered if the excitement of painting herself had turned into a mistake. Her lower lip trembled as she weighed the possibility that she had somehow done something bad. That evening, her parents sat with her at home. They smoothed her hair, reassured her that nobody was angry, and that the grown-ups had been cautious, out of care. During this conversation, you might imagine the father leaning close and gently explaining. Sometimes adults get scared about things kids don't. The brief dialogue softened the confusion, showing her the difference between her safe intentions and the worried interpretation at school. Her older sister stayed unusually quiet, which the girl noticed. That silence carried its own message, that what felt playful at home had looked very different in the outside world. Kids sometimes blame themselves when grown-ups overreact. She did a little of that in the days after. In class, her teacher noticed her hesitation and made a point of talking about how people see things differently based on their experiences. With that framing, the story became less about guilt and more about how playful ideas can be misread by others. When the crisis had passed, classmates surrounded her in curiosity. They reached for her arms, tracing the colors, impressed by the bold swirls and glitter. For a few days, she enjoyed being the center of attention. But later, when she picked up art supplies, she quietly leaned toward crayons and markers, choosing simpler materials instead of anything that might look too unusual. At family gatherings, the event became a story retold with laughter, her uncle recalling how her art project once set off alarms. She nodded each time, understanding that for her, the lesson was different than it was for the adults who told it. And it marked the beginning of a larger reflection on how schools, in moments of fear, sometimes move faster than reason. What unfolded in the days afterward revealed more than one family story. It exposed the way entire systems respond under stress. This was not only about one morning's confusion, but about the lessons everyone needed to carry forward. Fear spread through the school like spilled paint across a white sheet, starting from one small uncertainty and stretching quickly until it covered everything. Each adult acted on procedure, but very few paused to confirm the foundation of those fears. Procedures are useful until they stop people from asking a single, simple question. In this case, the question was as small as, "What happened?" The emergency binder had pages of steps for chemical exposures, but no reminder to check first whether a child was safe or whether the problem might be harmless. Training had drilled urgency, not curiosity. That imbalance helped drive the entire chain upward until the situation became something much larger than it ever needed to be. In the days that followed, the school district issued new guidance. Teachers were encouraged to observe carefully and to speak directly with children before escalating events. The office staff put in place one quick checkpoint before calling outside responders: a phone call home to verify what teachers observed. The simplicity of those measures spoke volumes. Parents later reflected on their side of the story. They appreciated the concern, but admitted frustration. The girl's mother noted plainly that no one had asked her daughter about the colors. Her father wondered why a phone call home had never come before the sirens. Their point was not anger, but practicality. Curiosity could have replaced panic. For administrators, the conversation turned often to liability, the fear of headlines, the fear of being blamed later for inaction. That fear matters, and it is part of why adults lean toward overreacting. But acknowledging it doesn't erase the need for balance. Safety and responsibility can coexist with careful assessment, and both are stronger when they do. For you, the takeaway is simple. When you see something alarming, pause and ask one clear question before assuming danger. That small habit not only slows panic, it opens the door to better understanding. And while this story began with colors that sparked fear, its deeper meaning stayed with everyone who heard it, pointing toward a larger truth about how we handle moments of uncertainty. Conclusion often returns us to the simplest part of the story: what to carry forward. That school day showed how quickly concern can grow when no one pauses to look closer or ask a plain question. Next time you see something alarming, try asking one question first. That small pause may be enough to sort fear from fact. Share your own stories in the comments. Moments when a misunderstanding grew larger than it needed to. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.